So yesterday there was what is currently investigated as a terrorist attack. Basically, some guy, a former military, has decided in New Orleans has decided to run over, just randomly go run over people. 15 so far. It looks like 15 people died, 35 were injured, and he was killed. Basically, his car crashed, and he then later died during the shootout. At the same time, or sometime after that, there was another incident in Las Vegas, also a former military, where basically a Tesla Cybertruck exploded right outside of I think it was Trump's one of Trump's hotels in Las Vegas, Trump International Hotel in Las Vegas. So we have a bunch of these things. They are we are hearing since it just happened yesterday. We are hearing different things. I was thinking about doing that on yesterday, but even today we still have very little information about specifically the motivation and what's really happening. But I think it's still important to cover. So welcome to the Daily Objective. Joining me today is Alex, and so I think I mentioned a bunch of things. I'll also mention with the first guy, the guy in New Orleans, Shamsud-Din Jabbar. Probably butchered his name. So as I said, 42-year-old U.S. Army veteran from Texas. Uh, uh, and so apparently it sounds like well, what we know definitely for sure is that there was an ISIS flag found in his car, uh, like after he was killed, and also apparently he did actually join ISIS not that long before the attack. There are still some FBI is still looking into it, so there are some possible accomplices, and apparently there were also IEDs, improvised explosive devices in the area. All of them were thankfully discovered and defused, so FBI is also looking if there were some accomplices. So let's cover just this one first. Alex, any yeah, just any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean it's extremely sad and just I listened to some of the like initial reports from some of the survivors and witnesses, and it's just absolutely just savage. But it there's a few things that kind of make me feel like the whole running people over as a method of terror is a very popular way for recent Islamic terrorists to utilize. And yeah, and I also heard that there were several Israelis who were very, very badly injured. I think one of
Uh,
them is in, yeah,
One was actually a Palestinian American, even.
okay.
So,
Hmm.
talking about
But I think he was also Israeli. I think he held an Israeli passport because we were, I
it
mean,
might have been a different person, might have been the same one. So,
okay. Okay. Because well that's interesting then. Because you have 35 injured and you have two Israelis and Palestinian that, you know, is or maybe it's not. Maybe that's not an interesting, a strange data point. Um, yeah, I mean these are all human beings that have died in this like absolutely savage way. And it really also reminds me of like the cruelty of these people because it's always, people who are celebrating life, right? They're celebrating in Pulse nightclub, right, which was the mass the terrorist attack at the gay nightclub in Florida. And or at the Nova Festival, right? Just having fun. They're just there to be alive and have fun. And they've just been, had their lives just completely taken from them in this
yeah, I mean, this was
terrible way.
specifically was, I believe, New Year's celebrations. I think it happened
Hmm.
just a few hours after New Year, I believe. And so first we have a super chat from PC. Thank you so much. He says it's so sad, horrific start to 2025. I mean, yeah, it's a really bad start. Also, thank you, Kel, for your super chat. Uh, and someone earlier in the chat said about college campuses were calling for globalizing the Intifada, and this is what it looks like. I mean, yeah, this is as I've said, to a large extent, we cannot really talk about what has happened insofar that we have no idea about the motivations. But it's truly, I mean, there is one motivation that we know. It's like pure nihilism. It's simply like just simply wanting to kill people. I mean, from the way it was done, uh, there was no like attempt to actually like maybe even escape from the situation. It was straight up like suicide attack to the extent you can think about it. Same to what happened in Las Vegas. So maybe I can bring that up just so people know. So yeah, the attack in New Orleans happened, and then later that day, Tesla's Cybertruck exploded outside of Trump International Hotel in Las Vegas. The driver died, and also several people were injured. A vehicle was apparently filled with fireworks and gas tanks. So it's I think there are some videos or some photos, so you can see how it like straight up explodes. And FBI is also investigating that as a potential act of terrorism. And there are also some, different media reporting in a different way. Also, FBI looks into it in a different way. Some say that there is a possible connection between the two of those, talking about both of them are former military, both of them basically have rented their cars from the same company or like from the same service, I believe. So there is some investigation into if there is a correlation between that. But I think the official, I think I have it. Chris Raya, the deputy assistant director of the FBI's counterterrorism division, said that there is no connection suspected thus far between the New Orleans attack and the explosion of a Tesla Cybertruck in Las Vegas. So far, they're saying there is no connection.
Hmm.
There might not be, but it's still, yeah, it's still super sad the fact that this happens, and uh, yeah, yeah. I mean, we've been hearing about for like a year about the globalizing the Intifada, and I mean, what do they think it looks like? What do they think, like the idea of again, like globalizing Intifada means? And I think, well, for let me go back to Alex because then I want to bring up a different point. Um,
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, this is exactly what globalizing the Intifada looks like. I mean, every I think during the second Intifada, there were two terrorist attacks a day, from the period I think of about September to March. And some of those were foiled, right? But you were having like it was constant, right? You would have bombings and bombings and bombings, and people getting run over and shootings. It was just absolutely nonstop, because that was their way of expressing themselves. And it was only when, I mean, think about what it took in order to like stop that trend, right? It took building like a huge wall, which the right wing in Israel were actually very against that wall being built. There was the which you wouldn't think, right? But the right wing in Israel were extremely against that wall being built because they were like, this is denoting a border where we don't want there to be a border. So it really was actually like a kind of a vision that was like a Ehud Barak kind of vision, to build it. But that you can't do that in America. You just simply can't. Although these were homegrown terrorists, it does appear. So yeah, absolutely, yeah, absolutely disgusting. But driving around with an ISIS flag, it's also, it's when the whole thing kind of is not piecing together very well for me because I'm like, when were they planning on taking the ISIS flag out, or is that just kind of kind of part of it that they wanted? Okay, I suppose that you do want to advertise, when you get killed, right? In order to remind people that it's very much still alive. The movement is very much still alive because the thing about ISIS is that they haven't really, besides the kind of event that happened in Russia. I do believe that that was in November of last year, or November or December of last year. Yeah, besides that, they haven't really managed to get in the press very much, and HTS have been taking up that space, I would say. People are talking about HTS, so maybe they felt like we need to get the word out that we're still here. We're still the cool guys on the block. Don't forget about us. Yeah.
Yeah, and we did an episode yesterday where I talked about how, in a sense, you cannot have a civilized society when you have people not having like the basic respect for non-violence, not just randomly going around and killing. And here it really shows how, and I don't want to say it like this, but like how easy it is. Like if people really want to kill each other, it's, in a sense, there is nothing that can stop you on a um on small level. It can, but when these two guys decide they want to go and blow up a vehicle outside of a hotel or run over people, yeah, they are just able to. And that's why that's why you have to realize that we've talked about the campus intifada, we talk about the universities, but that's the big problem when they defend the Palestinians and what they've done on October 7th, on what they or when they fight against Israeli basically being able to defend themselves. This is what you're supporting. This is what you're giving um basically giving fuel to. Uh, I mean, I don't know if you remember earlier this year, Aaron Bushnell, he was also a former military who set himself on
Yeah.
fire.
Ha.
And and yeah, that's that's in the similar light when uh yeah, because again, when you believe that, when you like actually believe that like Israel is committing genocide and that
Hmm.
American government is like supporting that, then yeah, you would do everything you can to basically like fight in against that in any way they can. That's why it's so disturbing that you have so many people fighting against Israel and supporting this, as you
Hmm.
said, like homegrown terrorists. Pretty much, this is like these are former American military. These are Americans. This is not some. I think you mentioned that earlier. It was reported that it was like an illegal immigrant.
Hmm.
I haven't seen that, so I'm not sure. But
No, no, no. I mean, I also said, I think it was just in passing. I think that was at the very, very beginning of
yeah,
the
yeah. I
attack.
mean,
There
yeah,
was initial reports that came out. Yeah.
yeah. Like minutes after. But yeah,
It
this
would be
is not.
better if it was, to tell you the truth, because you
Yeah,
you can
yeah.
actually defend against that. It's, you can, it's not easy, but you can. You
Yeah,
can have a
yeah. In some
border.
sense,
You can have you can check who people are.
yeah, there is a difference between sort of like terrorists coming in, or sort of trying to come in to commit terrorist attacks, and sort of like straight up Americans doing something like that. What do you do
Hmm.
against that? What do you do when like your own population starts to basically turn against itself? That's why really this is scary, and the fact that two things happen at the same time, seemingly now with no connection. I mean, we'll see more in the coming days, maybe coming weeks. But if there truly was no connection between two of these things, it's going to be even more scary because it shows that you just have this basically three states over at the same time. You just have a terrorist attack targeting, and also in the way those two terrorist attacks have been conducted, or sort of who they were targeting, seems different. So that might also suggest that there is no correlation. But it is truly scary.
Yeah, it really is scary. And I think also that, this kind of, the for me, it didn't really, for me, it wasn't that disturbing that Aaron Bushnell set himself on fire. It didn't disturb me that much. It was actually the reaction to him, doing it that disturbed me. That he is seen by like some, I mean, I would not consider them to be mainstream, right? But kind of mainstream left-wing figures have seemed to think that he's some kind of hero, right? This is, a person who enacts violence on themselves for for show. This is horrible. You're an absolute savage if you encourage people to harm themselves like this, or you glorify people who harm themselves like this. You're just at the lowest of the low.
Bonnie in the chat is asking, does it matter if it was organized or crazy individuals? Either way, their desperate attempts to insist that the initiation of force is the only way to deal with others and immoral morality. I
I do.
think, I think
Yeah.
if it was organized, I think in a sense it's better. Or you
Mm-hmm.
can target, if it was ISIS, we can bomb ISIS. We can fight against ISIS. We can fight against organizations. It's pretty much impossible to fight against this like phantom, basically just random individuals, sort of
Ghosts.
like,
Yeah.
yeah, sort of like deciding to do something like that.
Yeah,
I
because I
mean,
mean,
yeah.
even like, even like getting threats intelligence on someone who, someone maybe who is, you can do a lot to protect yourself against that. You can get threat intelligence on people who have infiltrated terrorist groups and they manage to understand their tactics, their motivations, and then you can gather intelligence on it. Even a lot of the times on the dark web, you can get threat intelligence as well, very, very good threat intelligence. And so yeah, it actually really is. It's possible to fight against this, very much actually. But it's an insurgency of your citizens. No, I mean you're gone. Like that's not. It's literally not possible. It's
uh,
not
we
possible. Yeah.
We also have a super chat from Bonnie. Thank you so much. And also, she's asking, but what's the source of ISIS? I mean, what do you mean?
Hmm.
Like, why people join ISIS, or what are they trying to achieve? I mean, the sort of general is just fighting against West. Um, yeah, I mean, depends what you specifically mean. I
Hmm.
mean, Alex, anything you want to say on that?
I mean, what do you mean? Like the source of ISIS in terms of what? Like the source of their inspiration? Okay, so the history of ISIS really did start in Syria. I mean, not really. It actually started in kind of started more like in Iraq, right? Because it was al-Baghdadi who originally I do believe was in a some kind of Al-Qaeda cell that was he did maybe serve some time in prison. I can't quite remember. But he ended up rising through the ranks, and they probably wouldn't have been such a massive success, I would say, if they hadn't, had state support from Qatar and Turkey, allegedly. Even it is alleged as well that, their evil was assisted by the United States and Israel, because a lot of the weapons that Israel and the United States give to, for example, the Kurds, ended up falling into their hands. So some, Israeli-made weapons ended up being found in the Al-Nusra Front and whatever. So, they were assisted very, very much, right? Inadvertently by a lot of different actors. Arguably the war in Iraq. I mean, not. I think unarguably, actually, the war in Iraq is what created ISIS. And why have they been so successful? They've been so successful because their the fact that they, I would say, filmed their attacks, like their crucifixions that they did and their beheadings. I would say that and also, they ISIS had a style, right? You knew when you were watching an ISIS video because you had the black, you had the black you had the black outfit, you had the flag, and they were very like, I don't want to say iconic, right? But they were, a terrorist, a good terrorist, organization has to have good marketing. Because if you don't have good marketing and you don't have a good brand, you're not going to be able to inspire others to join, and also inspire others to say that they're affiliated with you by proxy, so to speak. And so that is really kind of what caused their, kind of rise. That yeah, so it's and I think as well, because of the way that they fought, um, so brutally, and so, they reinstated slavery, you know. I mean, people, even Al Qaeda was like, oh God, like these guys have reinstated slavery, publicly, and they're not ashamed of it, right? So it's all of these things that actually made them kind of formidable, that people thought, oh, this is a formidable enemy. Like they do make people feel quite, scared, right? Whereas, everybody in the world who has, sense, I think fears ISIS. Whereas if you think about, the PKK or something, who are a horrendous, savage, horrible terrorist organization that recruit children and have killed many, many, thousands of Turkish people. It doesn't make people quake in their like skin. So that's what I think created ISIS, so to speak.
Oh, I just randomly started hearing myself. Jesus, that was scary. But I had a separate like window open somehow. We have a super chat from Bonnie. I'm not sure if I read it, but if I did, thank you again. We have a super chat from PC. Thank you so much. She says that man was crazy. I mean, yeah, for anybody to do something like that, you'd have to be. We also have a super chat from Jonathan. Thank you so much. Uh, and so there's so one more thing I wanted to go through is sort of just one response I specifically seen. Candace Owens has already managed to comment on this, with her beautiful takes as always. So there was one guy on X, Cam Salih. I was looking into his X a little bit. Apparently, he's like
Mhm.
a Palestinian libertarian, which is a really interesting combination. Um, but he said, well, he was flying an ISIS flag, so we at least know he was an ally of the US and Israel. And Candace Owens replied, sad but true. So already, stoking fire into the conspiracism of US and Israel are allies of ISIS. Uh,
Mhm.
so yeah, you
But
have, yeah.
I am sympathetic to that worldview in many ways, because I think that I'm from a different angle entirely, right? Because I do believe that it was the way that the Iraq war was conducted, and also in the sense of that the US and Israel were very willing, kind of, I would say very, they were not being discerning enough with who they were giving their, weapons to. So like for example, thinking like, oh, hang on a minute, maybe all these Kurdish weapons are going to fall into the hands of other people. So all of these, so I am sympathetic to that worldview, but it doesn't hold up. If you're going to, it's also they bring up this, every single person who brings that up, um, it brings up this video of Israel taking ISIS fighters, ISIS commanders, and taking them for medical treatment in Israel, you know? And it's like, oh, that means that and it's true, right? There were ISIS commanders that were having medical treatment in Israel, they were extracted from the battlefield, okay? And they were taken to have medical. But you also have to think, why would they have done that? Why? I mean, what would be, a reasonable thing? We're trying to recruit them. I mean, duh. They're trying to, I mean, it's not like it's really they're trying to get intelligence and they're trying to figure out a way to recruit them. Of course you would. I mean, it doesn't, of course you want to have people who are embedded inside of terror cells, letting you know, and thinking that they owe you something and giving you information. And we can argue about whether or not that's right or that's wrong, right? But obviously, and Candace also, I don't know where she gets her information from. I remember I don't know why this is, I'm not even
Kremlin.
laughing at this, but at the beginning of the no, sorry, at the beginning of the yeah, the Kremlin. That's exactly it, Daniel, the Kremlin. Because she said, um, you know, she doesn't think, she doesn't know any history, so I'm sure she doesn't think. So she says that Ukraine is persecuting Christians and banning, banning Christianity and outlawing Christianity. And I heard that and I was like, oh, what's that? I wonder what's going on. Why would the evil Ukrainians be banning Christianity? And it
Yeah,
was like,
I just quickly, I hate the fact that I know all these conspiracies and all these, like, I already know I know I'm not sure if she said specifically Christians. I know exactly what she's referring to, and Zelensky was absolutely right in doing so. But yeah, go on. Maybe I
well,
can
no, I
explain
mean,
later.
yeah, I mean, okay, but even taking that Zelensky was of course correct in doing so, right? Because the Russian
Well,
Orthodox
just to
Church was spying for the
yeah, yeah.
Kremlin, right? And by the way, just from a historical perspective, there were so many KGB agents who were masquerading as priests. I mean, back in the day, right?
Yeah,
I mean, this is a known
just to
thing.
quickly clarify, Zelensky is not like banning Christians. What we specifically mean is the Eastern Orthodox Church, basically, sort of similar to how Catholics have a pope. Also, Eastern Orthodoxy have like their own, basically, like there is like a specific. I don't know what they call it, but sort of like a pope. It's like an actual like organization. It's not sort of more decentralized like many Protestant religion. Eastern Orthodox is
Hmm.
very much like centralized, and specifically with the like Moscow Eastern Orthodoxy, or sort of the Russian Eastern Orthodox Church, is like helping Putin, is like
Oh yeah.
directly like so that sort of like that part of Eastern Orthodoxy was, I believe, banned in Ukraine after the outbreak of the
Well,
war.
but okay.
Yeah,
But I mean, come on.
but only like the organization, not like being not like being Eastern Orthodox.
No, I mean, I think it was also that they invented a church, right? They invented a, whatever. But it's just this constant appeal to authority that the moment somebody, like, I can dress up as a nun today, doesn't make me a nun, you know? It really, it doesn't. It's the same thing. Like you see, like you have the guy with the dog collar, right? And you say, well, he's a priest, or he's a whatever, or or a vicar. I don't even know the correct terms. I'm sorry if I'm not making the correct terms, but they literally had back in the 70s and 80s, they had a whole bunch of priests who would walk around and they would be assassins. It's very, and also why? Because they would use the confessions that people would give the priest, as a way to persecute people and to keep tabs on people. They were not priests. These were not people who had been ordained by anything, or who were like, I would imagine that most people who say that most people who are rabbis and priests and whatever, that they do actually probably care about the people that they, give advice to and minister to, whatever. But these were literal agents of the KGB who had been given like a fake priesthood by a fake church. So any information, right, that because that's what people do. People go and they would say, oh, and I heard, I heard Daniel over there talking on the phone with, yeah, and they would just use it against them. So that's obviously what's happening. I mean, it's just the same thing. It's literally just the same thing. And Candace, oh, they are banning Christianity. So who is she getting her information from? Who? Who's she get? I even hear, I'm like, okay, so you genuinely think that, what do you think that Zelensky's doing? What, that he has an internment camp for Christians? I don't understand what the accusation is. well, he's a Jew, so and this whole thing about Zelensky is like the most bizarre conspiracy theory out there. What do people say about Zelensky? And you know that they've been exposed in some capacity to Russian propaganda. They say number one, what they say he's persecuting Christians, and number two, he's corrupt. And I always say to people like, duh, I don't know anything about whether or not like Zelensky ever, fudge some numbers or something, right? But I naturally, this is a former like Soviet country, so there's a lot of corruption that goes on, but they always say that, and I always say, what is the evidence, right?
Yeah.
What evidence have you heard?
Yeah, so
Because,
I mean, specifically with the corruption, and we are highly off topic, so I'll just finish and then
sorry,
we can go
sorry.
back. No, but it's interesting stuff, especially relating to Candace. And we talked a little bit about it yesterday after the show, so I think that's interesting. But when it comes to like corruption, well, Ukraine is corrupt in the way that most Eastern like European nations are corrupt. It's just like oligarchy is sort of
Hmm.
what you just get from these post-Soviet things. When it comes to specifically Zelensky, pretty much all like he has villa in Paris or he has villa in
Oh
France or
yeah, and his
all those
wife
are
went to
yeah,
New
yeah.
York, and
All
yeah,
those
yeah.
are straight up like Russian propaganda. If
Hmm.
you like, if you are interested, you can like find a specific claim that people are saying about Zelensky. Try to find the original source, and it's like straight up like it is like straight up coming out of Kremlin.
It's like from
Uh,
Sputnik or something, or
yeah.
Russia Today.
Which I'll say a funny point of that. My favorite thing, I think there was one like really famous like X account, which was like it was some supposedly some American, and it talked about how Texas should be an independent nation because it has warm ports, and no American would ever use the term warm ports. That's like a specifically like Russian term referring
I
to
never heard the warm parts thing. What does that mean? What are they talking
basically the
about?
idea is that Russia has like trouble
Oh
accessing the
yeah, yeah, okay,
international
fine, yeah,
waters
because it free.
because
Yeah, okay, I get
because
it.
that
Yeah.
it doesn't have warm ports. But it makes no sense to say that in America. All American ports are warm ports. So that's why I found it funny. Like
Okay,
oftentimes,
yeah, so that
often
doesn't freeze in the
yeah.
winter. All
Uh,
right, well,
s-
that's pretty good. That's pretty good. Yeah,
uh,
to be honest, I get all my news from Candace Owens, to tell you the truth. I mean, if Candace Owens doesn't talk about it, I assume it just naturally hasn't happened. She's a great source of information. She truly is. I think it's real. I mean, her information about Ukraine, it's like she says Ukraine wasn't a country until 1991. Like, I, it
like
actually is no, it actually is like saying I don't know any recent history that's from the time that I was born. Yeah, I mean, like it really, I mean, this is stuff that's within our lifetime. I mean, you should know, right? This is not like something that happened in like 1720 or something. This is recent.
yeah, I mean, I don't want to go into that. Like
Sorry.
it wasn't a country, because again, like you can like maybe you can make a
Uh,
case that Ukraine never was a country. I mean, depends. Again, depends on like what is your like standard for what do you consider like Ukraine. Like you could make the same thing about like Slovakia. Slovakia was never a country between like it became a country because that's how countries work. But
No, I know. Okay, I
yeah.
get it. I know. But actually specifically with Ukraine, Ukraine actually was a country, and Russia was Moscow was a the Russians were almost like a colony of Ukraine in the past. So it like it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Um
I mean, just quickly, someone in the chat said, oh, what was it? I found it interesting. Da, 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 da. The question is why are Americans funding and arming the Holocaust of the Palestinian people? And that's straight up what I mentioned earlier. That yeah, this kind of talk, this kind of like Americans are supporting genocide. This is what fuels this like terrorism. If you truly believe that, Like, if you truly believe that American government is funding genocide, what else are you supposed to do than do these like
Hmm.
random terrorist attacks? Like, j- like, for especially now that you know the Trump has won, you could even see that, well, there is no although they even considered like what's her name? I even forgot. Kamala Harris. They consider her like being too pro-Israeli. So I have no idea what like even that means. Like for
Hmm.
so again,
Yeah,
it
and
makes
also,
me.
I mean, yeah, I mean, even speaking about that, I suppose we'll do another, daily objective on that at some point. Sorry, the reality show or daily objective on essentially what is the kind of Biden's rumored to be Biden's kind of goodbye present to Israel that's coming down the kind of the ways an act there's going to be well, we can talk about it later, but it's going to be interesting if it ever actually manages to materialize. So
Yeah, I mean,
there's
there is not much time. We only have about 2.5 weeks left. Actually, in 4 days, it's gonna be
well,
they're gonna certify the vote. Let's see what Kamala Harris does, but because she's the one certifying the vote as a vice president.
mhm.
Um, I think she'll probably just certify it. Uh, I'll be, I'll be very surprised if something different happens. And then, of course, 2 weeks after that, we have the inauguration of Trump. But that means that Biden is still in office for 2.5 weeks. And usually, presidents do a lot of stuff in their last few weeks, in their last few months. Generally, first thing they do, they pardon a bunch of people, and then they do a bunch of stuff to make the other administration a bit harder, or sort of like put some last things in place so the other administration sort of is already in a certain track to do
Mhm.
certain things. I sort of talked about it cryptically, but I think we'll definitely talk about it later. We also have a super chat from Jonathan. I'm not sure if I read it, but if I did, thank you again. And PC, he says Ukraine is older than Russia. I mean, if you consider the Kievan Rus as like the start of sort of
Mhm.
Ukrainians, then yeah, definitely it was.
And
And
that's
what yeah,
I
and
mean
whatever yeah.
go ahead.
No, it's okay. It is like sort of like trying to go back. It reminds me of the Tucker and Putin interview when he like brought up a book and like did a 2 hour lecture. It's
But
like,
I think that was very important. I really do, because that is if you actually read and I know you have because we spoke about it yesterday, if you actually read Alexander Dugin's philosophy, then you do understand that the Ukrainians being the original Russians, so to speak, uh, that is a major problem for the Russian Empire, and that that Russia really, as he says, right, Russia has to take Ukraine if it wants to be a great empire. Again, like it's not a great, like it's not a, great quote unquote empire now. It's obvious. So that's, I actually thought that the 2 hour kind of history lesson was very important, like, because it really did take you into the way that he views, um, you know, the world, and kind of like, because it I mean, it really is like a big kind of being threatened almost, right, by the existence of the Ukrainians, right, and being threatened by their history and their historical connections to the, I don't know what you want to call it, like the because of the whatever. We could talk about it another time, but it's like
yeah, I think you mean like important as in it was interesting to see this like mystical
yeah.
like nature of Russia. Like it is
Hmm.
like almost this yeah, like it's not based on like they have like historical records so they can justify basically the sort of the why Russia has to be the ruler. And Dugin is like a spiritual guide
Yeah.
to Putin pretty much. So
Yeah, he
uh,
really is. Yeah, and he's very inspired by all of this kind of very esoteric worldview. It's very it's very important, I think. And I love that Tucker Carlson interviewed him. I mean, like, what can't really understand what Candace and Tucker do. I mean, do they literally just call up some kind of handler in the Kremlin and they just say, okay, you're going to interview, Dugin, and then you're going to interview X, Y, and Z. I'm like, what? And then the Telegram guy, I mean, also is a big mystery to me.
Uh, yeah, I mean, wait, what did I, oh yeah, specifically with like, well, apparently there's also Lex Friedman is supposed to do interview with both Zelensky and Putin. He also asked Zelensky to do the interview in Russian, which was amazing way of like conducting yourself. So we'll see where it goes there. But it's important to remember, and also Tucker, it was Tucker, right? He did the interview with the foreign minister of Russia. Now I cannot remember his
Yeah,
name.
yeah. Okay, Lavrov, yeah.
Yeah, Lavrov.
Hmm.
So yeah, and I watched a little bit of that, and again, it was just straight up like Russian talking
Oh
points, like
yeah, yeah,
Russian
yeah,
propaganda.
yeah.
Like you
Abs yeah.
cannot, you have to realize that like no actual like journalist would be allowed to like conduct an actual interview.
Yeah.
No amount of pushback would be like allowed.
That's
So
the thing. I don't have anything against, Putin being interviewed. I think he should be interviewed, right? Like the same way Bashar al-Assad was interviewed by Charlie Rose. Okay? Like that was a good interview. That was a great interview for somebody being challenged and ultimately exposed. Or like the Emily Maitlis interview with, Prince Andrew, right? I think that these characters should be interviewed by decent, genuine, inquisitive journalists. Yeah. What I don't think you should do is have, Bashar al-Assad on, interview him for 2 or 3 hours and not challenge him on anything, not challenge him on, the way he views reality. And Tucker was picked for that specific reason because they don't view him as a real journalist.
So that much about American Intifada and American terrorism. I mean, Alex, anything to add? As I've said, we this was episode sort of just covering what we know so far. So most likely we'll have more information. Especially, I think the most important part will be if we ever find out the motivation
Mhm.
or anything closer about who they were. But until then, Alex, any last thoughts?
Yeah, just my thoughts really are with the families. I don't want to say thoughts and prayers with the families, but like, I want to give them moral support. Um, really, really hope that the people who are currently injured in hospital, that I know that people will be visiting them. Um, and it just makes me feel really, really sad as well for the residents of New Orleans because they're going to walk around for the next, whoever knows how long, looking behind them. Not knowing where to stand. I mean, that happens to me here. We have actual boulders up all over. I mean, everywhere in Jerusalem, right? Like there's no streets that just has a pavement with no boulder, because of these attacks. Yeah, so it's uh,
Even boulders isn't like poles
yeah,
stopping
yeah,
people from or stopping cars from going um into the streets.
pedestrians,
Yeah,
yeah,
pedestrian.
into victims, yeah, into people. So yeah, so I feel very, very sorry for them, and I really hope that we don't have to do another video. You know, I really hope we don't have to do another Daily Objective or reality show about this ever again.
Someone in the chat says not NATO is a group of nations operating upon secular atheistic power geopolitical objectives. They are antichrist in many of their principles. I agree. That's why I love NATO. They are antichrist. They are secular atheists. I love all that.
I don't even
Uh,
necessarily like, I mean, I don't, this is also ridiculous because if you want to pray, right, and you're a NATO soldier or a NATO pilot, and you want to pray before you have a mission, they'll let you pray, okay? Like this idea that like that it's a secular or whatever. What exactly does that mean? Are they secular in the way the Soviet Union was secular, where they banned all religion completely? What do you mean by secular, right? I mean, I hate this
well,
reductive nature.
I think technically Soviet Union would sort of um, fall more under the idea of state atheism.
Mm-hmm.
I think secularism means the government has no business in religion, meaning it also has no business banning any religions. So being state
There you go.
atheist, I think, plays more with the fact that
That
basically
is a religion,
any
you know?
yeah, in some sense, basically that all any sort of religion is banned. We also have a super chat from PC. Thank you so much. 3 years on, will the war ever end? I mean, something sort of to remember is that 3 year like it's different since we are like living through it, and we're like, every day you feel every day you know that every day is going to, but 3 years isn't really that long of a time when it comes to war. I mean, I if you go to past wars, I mean, if you go to, the Syrian civil war, technically it's
Mm-hmm.
still happening, but let's say if you consider that after the fall of Assad, it sort of ended, which probably not, but even if you did, that's still like 12 years. And some of it was basically like a, frozen conflict. So we'll see. I mean, one big move was recently, since basically there was a deal between Ukrainian and Russian government for allowing the Russian gas to
Mm-hmm.
go through Ukraine into Europe. This deal wasn't renewed. So there will be no more gas going through Ukraine into European nations, which I think most of them diversified, but some of them didn't. So that might be a problem. We'll see also with Trump coming into office. I think before the election, he was, I think, seen as sort of like anti-war, in a sense of anti-Ukrainian candidate. But I think
Mm-hmm.
after his election, he's been
Yeah.
shifting like crazy towards support of Ukraine. So
Mm-hmm.
hopefully he won't try to like negotiate any deal. Hopefully he'll I think the support for Ukraine went for another year. I think the Congress basically approved budget for like 2025, like for Ukraine. So they have at least year both from Europe and Ukraine. So
Well, but even that is still like the support for Ukraine cannot continue because, in my opinion, by the Americans, because they have not they do they there's a global. I mean, I'm just talking from on a practical level. Like there's a global ammunition shortage. And Ukraine has done very, very well in terms of being able to ramp up their domestic production, but their domestic armaments are just really not, I mean, they're how you would expect them to be for a defense industry of, less than a couple of years, basically, right? But so unless the United States and Europe take seriously the situation that they find themselves in, and vastly increase their industrial capacity to create these very, very simple munitions, they're not going to be able to I mean, they're just not on a physical level. There has to be a massive shift in approach, a massive shift in strategic concept. And this isn't, by the way, like this is, I think, widely accepted as being, true. Even especially now, because we didn't until the Ukraine war, we as people who are kind of, I suppose, like people who are involved in the defense kind of, world, we didn't really understand how much ammunition you need for a war. We didn't really, I mean, and because there hadn't been a war that you could really compare it to. The US has been fighting insurgencies, Israel's been fighting insurgencies, hasn't really fought a war, in
yeah,
many, many years.
I
And
I,
you
I mean
see how
it,
much it's insane. It's just insane how
Yeah,
much you
in a
need.
sense, we haven't seen, because it's basically two modern militaries, or two militaries
Hmm.
with modern equipment, with pretty much the most modern equipment that they can get, sort of fighting against each other. Which, yeah, I
Hmm.
think if you look back, I don't think we've ever had basically, like, you don't really have sort of big nations fighting against each other. Um,
And now I think
some
you see, I mean, Ukraine was out of like ammunition within, I think, like few months. I mean, it was insane. And it was, and then it, even Israel now, even Israel, like there's a big problem with producing simple munitions like 155 millimeter tank shells. I mean, really, really serious. So now you now I think it's so now I think there has to be a change in the strategic concept. And also, by the way, somebody's calling us warmongering libertarians. We're not libertarians. Thank you very much. Unless I can't really speak for Daniel, although I have heard you say that you're not a libertarian. And yes, indeed. By the way, it's not warmongering. If you don't increase your industrial base and you don't have a good strategic posture to deter invaders, then that's warmongering. Okay, it's not warmongering for me to have a gun right on my hip. It's not warmongering. That's a deterrent, right, for the other people that might look at me. Just think through what you're saying. Yeah. So just we're libertarian, so let's just all not have a defense. Let's not defend ourselves. Okay, you'll get invaded. Have fun,
Yeah, and someone
especially
says,
next to Russia.
someone in the chat says we need to stop funding Ukraine, let Europe fund them, not our problem. So maybe I'm biased since I live on a border with Ukraine straight up. But I think if you are an American and if you believe that Russia is not trying to fight against America in every possible way they can find besides straight up attacking them, if you think Russia is not trying to interfere in American elections, then good luck. But I think it's clear that Russia is absolutely America's enemy, and helping Ukraine is basically the absolutely cheapest way of sort of protecting Americans
Well,
because you
also
don't.
well,
And
I don't
not to
know.
mention, not all aid into Ukraine is like we're not like sending helicopter money into them. It's like we're more at the start. It was mostly just donating like all the equipment we pretty much would never use either way.
But even
And
then,
yeah,
but also he does make a point inadvertently, right? In that Europe actually really does need to step up and start helping and increase their industrial
yeah,
base and start to take their defense a bit more seriously. I mean, Poland managed to get to 4% of their GDP that's being spent on defense.
yeah. I think when it
And
comes to
yeah,
support of Ukraine, it's about 50-50 between America and Europe. So I think definitely you
it should be
and
more. Like
yeah,
it,
definitely.
for me, I really do think like, the Americans are very far removed from this in many ways, right? The war is not going to come to them tomorrow, but it the war is going to come when the war's at you. So, do what Poland has done. I was very impressed with the way that they've kind of stood up to the plate. I mean, the UK, I mean, Germany has such a phenomenal industrial base to be able to deliver the kind of the level of weapons that you would need in order to create a true deterrent. But so they do need to stand up, Daniel. I really do. I think that you can't excuse them for having, they're covering 50%. I mean, 50% is pathetic, I think. The war's on their doorsteps. These are rich countries.
Yeah, absolutely. But that's sort of the bigger problem of sort of basically the general policy of the European Union of not really trying to do anything, not really trying to be prosperous, not really trying to stand up in any way. Sort of, we are mostly kicking ourselves or sort of
Hmm.
you know
Further down the line.
dismembering our own legs, but that's again for another episode.
Yeah.
So with that, I think we can wrap up. As many of you pointed out, yes, there is no reality show today, but we did a longer TDO instead. We'll be back tomorrow, and we should be doing both shows, both the daily objective and the reality show. Thank you, Alex, for joining me today. Thank you, everybody, for watching, and we'll see you tomorrow. And bye bye.